Welcome my friends, Seven Gray here. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Today I want to talk about box truck versus the step van for RV conversion. Which one is better? Today I have Dale with me. He owns a box truck. I'll link an episode above of his tour of his box truck. And I own a step van, and I'm a former owner of a box truck. So we're going to be talking about pros and cons, benefits, advantages to each of these two platforms to give you some things to think about if you have not purchased one and you're considering both of these. So we're going to go through a number of items and try to just be we're going to try to be impartial and try to give honest opinions and honest advice. And I think probably both of us, we probably both love both vehicles.
Yeah. I was going to see if you wanted to swap for 6 months.
That's actually would be a fun idea. Swap vehicles like, like a house swap kind of thing. So anyway, that may be a fun thing for a future video to have from us. How long have you been in your box truck?
I've had my box truck for about 1.5 years. I do not live in it full time. I'm just a traveler. Mm-hmm. But I built it with the intent that if I do want to go full time, I'll be able to do that. So but about 1.5 years.
Okay, so Dale lives in a house. We're parked in front of his house right now. Both of our vehicles are side by side, and we just went through and did a little tour of his vehicle, and we're sitting inside of my step van right now. So one of the things that comes to mind is where I think the box truck has a clear advantage, at least between a standard box truck and a standard step van, is comfort on the highway. I believe that box trucks have a superior advantage for long distance travel on the highway, and that's because the cab area, for the most part, unless you've modified it significantly on a box truck, is a contained cab. It's like the front end of a van. It's the nose and compartment. Right. Yep. And so you've got all of that acoustic insulation there. You have a dash with air conditioning. You have doors that are wing doors that close on the sides.
Right, just standard doors.
Yeah.
It's basically, mine is basically a van front end with the box body.
Right.
It's not, anything special, but it is. It's like driving a van, right, basically.
So box truck, pros and cons, you have cruise control.
Yes, I do.
Cruise control, I don't have cruise control. Some step vans have cruise control, but it's very rare. Air conditioning.
I have cab air conditioning, and it works great. So.
Okay, so he has cab air conditioning. Step vans by default do not have cab air conditioning. They are installed in some particular units, like a Mack truck or Snap-on tool trucks have it. Some other step vans might have it, but typically they don't, like UPS, FedEx trucks, all of those. They do not typically come with dash units for AC, and so you're involved all that expense of installing that. Let's talk about visibility on driving. You have a standard windshield with a lower cab, like your roof is closer to your head.
There again, it's a standard Chevrolet 2008 van. Right. If you pulled that 2008 van up next to the front of my truck and didn't see the backs of them, you'd think it was two vans sitting there.
Yeah, so exactly. So think of any van that you may have driven, and a box truck's going to be a bulkier version of that, but the cab area is the same.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about city driving for the two head-to-head. I would say, other than the acoustic noise, probably the step van has a slight advantage in a couple of areas. One, the turning radius of the wheels, how far they're able to turn on a step van, is much, much greater. I can turn around in about half of the turning radius in a step van than I could in my box truck. And I think that's just due to the way that the wheels turn and the mechanism they have. That said, the suspension between the two, there's a much softer suspension typically on the box truck versus the step van. So I have a very rough ride. I have a spring suspension system, whereas I think probably you have standard shocks plus springs. So it's a coil spring plus a shock versus a what do they call those, dippy springs?
Yeah, leaf spring.
Leaf springs, that's it, exactly, leaf springs. So I have leaf springs, a very rigid suspension. A couple other things, visibility. I have much greater visibility, giant glass going around, and a higher ceiling area, more visibility, tighter turning radius. So in a city, I would give a slight edge to the step van. Okay, so let's talk about stealth camping, stealth vehicles, sleeping in your vehicle. In BLM land and national forest, it's not an issue.
Right.
Both vehicles would be equal. But if you're talking about trying to do stealth camping in a city, I'm not talking about taking either one of these vehicles and parking in a residential neighborhood. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about on a city street or in an industrial park, a business park, in that kind of place. So parking in that environment, if you've not cut up your vehicle and added windows, you've not made visible doors, just stock vehicles with minimal modifications, where would you say the edge is on?
I would say they're probably about equal. Now on my truck, if you see the tour, I've actually put windows in the door in the back of mine, and I built mine for my comfort, not for stealth. But I would say, just from what I've seen, that they're probably about the same.
Yeah.
Because if my truck still had the standard roll-up doors in it instead of the doors that I've installed, you would just think it was a work truck.
Yeah.
And then I've seen people on different videos where if they have a box truck or a step van, they throw a clipboard or a hard hat or one of those yellow vests on the, and people just think it's a work truck.
Right.
So it depends on what you want to do. But as far as the stealth, I would say they're equal.
I agree. I think both look like industrial vehicles, and it depends on how much you've modified it, on losing stealth points. If you've added windows, you've added roof vents, you've added visible solar, any exterior plugs that don't look like industrial plugs, like plastic plumbing thing, you're losing points for that. But then again, it goes back to how important is stealth to you? Where are you at? Are you doing this just one night as you're passing through a city? Are you staying in that particular area for weeks on end? A lot of other factors. It also is, what is the definition of stealth camping? I just am talking in rough terms of the two vehicles side by side. I think they're basically equal.
Yeah.
So outside of stealth camping, if you're talking about just ease of building out the vehicle on the inside, what are your thoughts? Which one would be easier?
I would say on the box truck and the step van, they're pretty much equal again, because you're dealing basically with a square box. You don't, if you're building a bus or a trailer or whatever else, you're dealing with a lot of curves, whereas this is pretty much, it's not perfectly square, but it's a square as opposed to the curves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think I agree. I would say probably just a slight little bit of an edge to a box truck, and that's because in a step van you have pocket doors, and those pocket doors are inset by about 3.5 inches, 4 inches for a good, what I'm looking over at it right now, maybe 3 feet, 3.5 feet, something like that. So you've got this distance of 40 inches ballpark that's inset that you've sort of got to work around, and you have a little jog going in, and then it's flat all the rest of the way back. But other than that, I would say roughly equal all the way around for building.
And your width is pretty much a standard, even if it's a bus or whatever. It's usually, if the widest you could be on the inside is probably 7.5 foot, because I think 8 feet is the legal limit for trucks and vehicles.
There are some step vans that have 8-foot widths, like Paul Barger, his is an 8-footer, but many of them are 7 feet or somewhere in between.
Right, and then it just depends on how long your vehicle is as to what you can do with it. Yours is what, 18? Mine's 14.
We're talking cargo space, by the way.
Excuse me. But yeah, so you have an extra 4 feet of room that you can do things that I can't do. So if you're considering doing this, I would say do your homework first. Decide, have a basic idea of what you want to put in your truck, and then go find the truck that matches what you want to do. I mean, if air conditioning in the cab is important, then look for something with air conditioning in the cab. If length and size is important, look at that. So just do your homework before you start.
Right.
Don't necessarily buy a vehicle and then go, well, what can I do? Then go, this is what I want to do, buy the vehicle.
Yep. I agree 100% with that. That's spot on. Let's talk about camping on BLM land. Boondocking is the term we use for that, where you're just dry camping out in the middle of Bureau of Land Management land for 14 days. In that kind of a scenario, I would say roughly equal. Then again, I'm talking about vehicles that are not highly modified and roughly similar, like maybe both of them have one roof vent, both of them have similar solar, all of those kinds of things. Trying to compare like to like as much as possible. But I would give a slight edge to a step van if the wall partition has been removed, because it gives you a contiguous space, which is the way mine is set up, front to back, with giant windows wrapping around like a Class A RV. So it gives a whole bunch of light coming in here, and unless you've added a skylight or added windows, as you have done, you have a very dark space in the back of your box truck, which is the way my box truck was. I had no windows back there. So I would say out of the box, well, again, I guess I modified mine. I've removed that wall, but it's much easier to remove that wall completely in a step van versus a box truck, where it's part of the cab plus part of the box itself. And you've got to remove that section to get in there, and then still you don't have that much light. It's more like a Class C vehicle. Yours would be like a Class C, and mine would be more like a Class A. So if you compare traditional RV, Class C, without windows, to a Class A with a windshield, that's maybe closer to a proper comparison.
That sounds about right
sense
to me.
Okay.
There again, my whole thing on buying a vehicle is figuring out what you want to do, and then find the vehicle that fits that. Or if you have to, like with me, I think I've told you that I was looking for a school bus, and this box truck that I have now just kind of fell in my lap, and it was too good of a deal to pass up. So in that situation, you kind of build around the truck. But if you're just starting out and you don't know what you want to do, figure out what you want to do, go find your truck.
Let's talk about entry points, because you purchased a vehicle that was already had a space for a door on the side, but it was a roll up, correct? And it had steps going in, which is a rare situation,
in a box truck,
or less common in a box truck. In a step van, by default, every step van will have this because they're called step vans. There's a set of steps that goes up on the passenger side at the passenger door, and typically a jump seat that's behind that. So the entry in and out is very, very easy on those steps. With a box truck, you have to either go through a cutout hole from the cab, or you go through the rear doors, which are either swing doors or roll up typically, or you find the rare exception, as Dale has done, where you have a side entry door, which is towards the front, usually on the passenger side, and then usually there'll be a set of steps there. So I would say if you're looking for a box truck and you're interested in entry points, Dale's solution is really a nice solution. And if you can pick up one with lift gates, I love the idea of lift gates. Gives you a patio. If you put it at half height, you get a step to go up onto the lift gate, and then a half step to go into the back, so you can really find a nice equal ground there. And if it's only at half height, you put it up maybe 18 inches. That also gives you the height to be able to sit on it outside.
Makes a great workbench.
Yeah, you can work. Yeah, that's another good point. So look for lift gates. What are your thoughts on fiberglass ceilings?
Well, my truck has a metal ceiling, so I've never dealt with a fiberglass ceiling. Now I know that there again, that's one of those things where if you've watched YouTube videos, people either love them or they hate them. I mean, apparently the big thing is with the fiberglass, it gives you a little bit more light inside. But there again, that's not something I can really speak to because I've never had that experience. But I would, common sense or my way of thinking says that if you want the light, then the fiberglass is great. If you don't, then obviously you go with metal. Or there again, what's available when you're looking to buy it.
What are your thoughts on diesel versus gas?
I like the diesel. This is actually the first diesel vehicle that I've ever owned. But there again, it's what do you want to do? You talk to some people and they love diesel, other people hate it. For me, everybody worries about the maintenance cost, but to me it's pretty much equal. Now, they're as far as standard maintenance. I mean, if you're going to change the oil in a gas and it's 5 quarts of oil, and then you're going to change it in a diesel and it's 5 quarts of oil, the cost is the 5 quarts of oil. So there's no real difference. Same thing on brakes and anything like that. If because the brakes don't know that they're diesel or gas. So it's what do you like? What are you comfortable with? What can you get comfortable with?
Right.
People, there again, mileage is a big thing, because most people, if you told them you had a gas vehicle with 250,000 to 300,000 miles on it, they'd look at you in horror, going, "Oh my God, that thing is going to just be junk here in the next 6 months." Whereas with a diesel, you tell them 250,000 miles, and it's just getting broke in, you know. So I enjoy the diesel. A lot of people are worried about fuel economy, cost of fuel. Fortunately, in my case, that's not something that I really worry about. But to me, diesel's 50 cents more a gallon, depending on where you're at, what time of year it is. It is a little more expensive, but there again, it's just, I think my truck gets close to 14 miles to the gallon, which if it was a gas, it might get 16 or 17. So I really like the diesel.
Okay. Another thing to point out, and probably advantage to the box truck here, well, it depends on how you look at it, is if you're comparing a diesel in a box truck such as yours, the mechanical parts that are being used there, like you mentioned the brakes and a few other things, the brakes are closer to those being used by gas vehicles as far as the rotors and the calipers and all of those components, radiators, things like that. So your costs are very similar to the gas vehicle versus, say, the step van that I have has industrial parts. So the brakes are set up for UPS, so they're double or triple in size, and that will raise up the cost of the brakes and the brake repair because you're dealing with industrial strength. But then again, the brakes that I have and the stopping power that they have and the durability over a number of miles maybe triple the cost. So I think in the end it is roughly equal. I get something with higher durability, longer miles, I pay 3 times as much, it lasts 3 times as long.
Right. And with my vehicle, there again, it's based off of a Chevrolet van chassis. So basically the frame and all that is a Chevy van. It's just the only thing that makes a difference is the box on the back. So all your mechanical stuff is exactly the same as it would be if it was a diesel van.
And what's your thought on roll-up doors versus swing doors?
My truck had roll-up doors in it, and they're convenient, but when you're converting it into a living space, they allow a lot of dirt in the vehicle, and that was one of the main reasons I got rid of the 2 that I had. I took the roll-up door out of the back of mine, as you'll see on the tour, and put a door and 2 windows. The roll-up door that was on the side, I took it out and just put a mobile home door. And it gives you a lot. There again, if you're out in the desert or out in the woods and you're going down a dusty dirt road, it's just sucking all that dirt because your roll-up door is made in sections. So you might have 5 different partitions or wood or whatever the door's made out of, and all those gaps allow all that dirt in. So I got rid of mine and went solid doors and stuff.
And you have quite the handyman skill set. Was it difficult to remove for you at your skill level?
The door? Yeah. No, not really. I mean, it's a pain in the butt, but it wasn't difficult. It's just the manage. For me, I was basically trying to do it myself. But what you can do is, like I said, it's in 4 sections. You take the first section apart, you roll it out, take it out, and then you just do it section at a time. You're not removing it. That whole 7x8 door or whatever the size of it is, you can take it off in sections. All
right, some great tips for you if you do decide to buy either a step van or a box truck with roll-up doors. I would recommend, if you can find it, buy it from the get-go with swing doors on it, unless you find some sort of great deal that's just you can't walk away from. Also, for both categories, step van and box truck, beware of vehicles and what I call high use. That would be something more like a FedEx truck. If it's a box truck or a step van, there's start, stop all day long. That's really, really tough on brakes and the engine and everything else. If you can find a vehicle that's a plumber vehicle, an electrician vehicle, a mechanic's vehicle, something like that, where they're driving to a destination, parking the vehicle for 5 hours or something, and then driving somewhere else, that will be far more durable for you in the future. So and it doesn't really matter which platform.
Right. And for mine, when I bought my truck, I bought it from a friend of my brother's. My brother and this guy had worked together for 15 years. He had at one point it was a delivery truck for an electrical supply company. So it was basically driven from here in Lakeland to Miami, deliver stuff, pick it up. So it was all interstate mileage on it. I also, because he worked with my brother, I felt comfortable in what he was telling me. Because he told me, here, this is what I've done. I'm X, Y, Z. Here's what if I'm keeping it, this is what I would do next. So I was comfortable with all that information.
Okay.
And so if you can get the history, get it, and if you trust it, then go for it. So, yeah.
Good advice. Good advice. Let's talk about the basic costs. If you have an engine, let's say diesel engine, and it has 100,000 miles on it, step van versus box truck, similar use, say a mechanic's vehicle, plumber vehicle, something like that. At least my initial viewing and looking around, box trucks tend to be slightly less expensive than step vans, but
Right.
not by much, maybe 20% less.
Probably. There again, you have more experience with the two, so I can only speak to the box truck. I've had my truck for about a year and a half. I've changed the oil in it twice. I was on a trip. I did have the rear brakes went out on it. I did have to have it towed and have new brakes, and I think it was $600-700, but that's a whole, brake job on the rear end.
Thank you so much, Dale, for joining me for this episode of this conversation, box truck versus step van. I think we're friends. We don't necessarily think one is better than the other. Just like you said, it's okay.
Sorry.
So that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Savor the moment, and I'll see you next episode.